introducing our speaker today, Dr. Manna Hagos. Dr. Hagos is an Eritrean American physician entrepreneur and author with interests in medical technology, educational technology, and artificial intelligence, also known as AI. Dr. Hagos obtained her MD from the University of Southern California and then trained an anesthesiologist at LAC Medical Center, which is also a level 1 trauma center. She obtained her Bachelor of Science in Psychobiology from the University of California, Los Angeles, otherwise known as UCLA, where she graduated with a 3.9 GPA. Her new book for aspiring first-generation physicians, The PreMed Survival Guide, is now available as an ebook and an audiobook at drmanna.com, so make sure you check that out. Thank you and welcome, and thank you for joining us today, Dr. Hagos.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the whole team for having me. I'm very excited to be here and share relevant tips and gems for all of the pre-med students in today's webinar. So briefly, my name is Dr. Manna Hagos, proud first-generation Eritrean American immigrant. And my journey into medicine was interesting and not so unique at the same time. So we'll get into that in a moment. And I dropped my contact information in the chat, both for my IG and for my website. So for everyone who is interested in getting more information, those are some great ways to be able to reach me. I do take questions over IG. So that is another option for you as well, in case we don't get to the questions in today's webinar.
Okay.
So in terms of my journey into medicine, I grew up in SoCal, so Southern California, and I thought I was going to be I was interested in the natural sciences. So astronomy, oceanography, all that different kind of stuff. And I saw my first human brain in elementary school. We had science discovery days, and it was an Alzheimer's patient, so an elderly man with dementia. And I thought, okay, this is the coolest thing. I'm going to have to go into medicine because this is so interesting and I don't have to try and work really hard to figure out what it is that I want to study or get into. And then after, I've had various experiences growing up where my interest in medicine matured. I noticed discrepancies in health equity and access. And I thought, okay, this is a great way to contribute to the solution by becoming a physician and lending my energy and, mental aptitude to address some of these, inequities that I noticed. I went to UCLA for undergrad. That experience was very, very interesting. I had the opportunity to graduate from a really well-resourced high school, and I graduated with a 3.95. I was very fortunate to have great support, was able to get several scholarships to attend UCLA. And I showed up on the campus ready to go. And my first few classes were over 300 students. And I just automatically felt intimidated, like, whoa, everyone here is probably really smart. And I don't really know how this is going to work out, but I'll just try my best. And I did okay the first year. I made there was an honor society you could make based off your GPA, made that. And the second year, I started overloading myself with activities, trying to be a competitive medical school applicant. And also I started struggling in some of my science classes. I hated general chemistry. For anyone who is taking it or about to take it, it is like the bane of so many pre-med's existence. So you are in good company if you notice that some of your chemistry or physics classes are just challenging. It's okay. You can still become a great physician. Don't worry. It would have been so helpful if I heard that, because I thought, oh my gosh, like I'd be in my exams for my midterms and I would be praying during the exam, like, okay, I probably could have studied a lot harder, but if I can just pass this class, because I don't want to take this again, that would be great. So I was fortunate to pass and didn't have to repeat it. But that experience gave me a lot of insight, because I started analyzing why I was even there. I'm like, why am I here at UCLA? Why did I work so hard to get here? Where am I going? Like, do I really want to be a doctor? It's so freaking hard to be a doctor for so many reasons. Classwork, for some of us, or those of you who may have to work to help support yourself or your family. If you're a first generation underrepresented minority in medicine, there are additional challenges in regards to accessing relevant mentors. Some advisors tend to be naysayers. A lot of pre-meds encounter that. I encounter that. I had an advisor that, because my second year grades weren't so hot, and I was trying to change my major from biology to physiological sciences, phi-sci. I was one of the top 3 most grueling science majors at UCLA. And she didn't think I could do it. She stood up from her desk when I tried to transfer into the major, threw the anatomy book in front of my face on the desk and said, "Can you do this?" And I thought, yeah, I can. I've got friends in this major. I know it's hard, but I'm going to be a doctor. She didn't believe me, and she denied my request to change my major. And I had an epiphany after that. I realized that the only one who was going to be responsible for my success was myself. And once I became very clear on where I was going and why I wanted to get there, creating a plan that I could execute to do well academically and manage my time, manage my stress, because I hated being stressed out a week or 2 before exams, would allow me to create a plan and then execute accordingly. And I did. After I did that, after that experience, I made the dean's list every quarter until I graduated with a 3.95 GPA. And for anyone who has specific questions about that, feel free to drop that into the chat so we can keep this more interactive. First of all, stop now before I go on to the details of applying to medical school as a first-gen underrepresented minority. Are there any questions so far?
Yeah, there are 2. So this is a longer question, but I'm going to ask the shorter one first. Do I really need math as a researcher surgeon? I do not appreciate the mathematical challenges.
Do I need math as a surgeon?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a very interesting question. I'm not a surgeon. I've worked with tons of amazing surgeons. The main point to keep in mind with all the various prerequisites for medical school is that it's to create a foundation for critical skills and a foundation for applying yourself, being disciplined, being consistent about your effort, being able to be creative and resourceful when you encounter challenges, and then you apply that as you progress in your career. So for example, do you need to know calculus? Will you be using it as a surgeon? Probably not. I would ask a surgeon exactly for them, what do they use? But the majority of the type of math that you end up using in certain fields of medicine is basic math, arithmetic, multiplication, division, fractions. I use a lot of that because when it comes to pharmacology, for example, you are going from one unit of measurement to another. So going from grams to micrograms, what is that conversion? Being able to do that quickly in your head. If you have to start off on paper doing that because you're not used to certain conversions, that's fine. But eventually you get to a point where you're able to do that pretty quickly with very high accuracy. You can always, of course, double check with your phone. So the type of math that you're going to be using as a surgeon, as a physician, it's likely going to be basic math. It's not going to be advanced calculus or anything like that, or trigonometry. So keep that in mind when you take your classes and you're struggling and you just don't like it and you think, is this really even relevant? It is the foundational skills that is very, very relevant. It's a critical skills. It's the problem solving. It's being able to tap into your social resources in terms of your peers, your professors, etc., to be able to solve a problem. That conceptually is what you use all the time, every day, as a physician or as a surgeon.
All right, and then the next question was kind of along those same lines, but they were just asking how you survived all of the challenging classes like organic chemistry, physics, biology, any other chemistry classes you have to take.
Yeah, all the lab classes and whatnot. So it's the strategy and framework that I used to be successful in those hard science classes are the ones that I outlined in the PreMed survival guide. So which is available at drmanna.com. So I'll share a few tidbits with you all today. So for example, organic chemistry. So organic chemistry, tons of equations, various pathways that you need to memorize and then apply. So this particular reaction, as it's converting or as it's changing the situation, how do you know how to keep all of the, the components and the chemistry behind it straight in your mind? It really comes down to being hyper organized. I say hyper organized because as you advance in your education until you go into medical school and practice as a physician, being very organized about what you're starting with, understanding the fundamental science behind it, and then using that in your available resources. So your textbook, your classes, using the great internet resources available to understand why things are happening, why do things change the way they do, is going to be something that you're going to use essentially the rest of your life. You already do it now in one way or another in your life. So for organic, so I came from general chemistry and I disliked it. I did not like it for many reasons. It just seemed like it was all over the place to me. And then I realized that I wasn't studying appropriately for myself. So everyone studies differently and everyone can get different levels of success. So what does that mean practically? If you are someone that likes to talk out problems, then you need to talk out problems. If you're trying to do what other people are doing, which is just hitting the books, and doing the questions, and that's not giving you as much benefit, then that's a marker that you're not studying according to your own needs. Some people, they need to move. They're like a little bit more of kinesthetic learners. So if it helps you to be a little bit more focused while you study, because you find that sometimes your concentration may not be on your books, then being able to, let's say, like use a pen, or you walk around, or you're talking out the problem, or if you think you understand the problem, then you talk over the solution with a friend, the teacher, the TA, to make sure that your understanding is correct. Because we've all been in the situation where we think we know what the material is, we study for it, we get to the exam, and then we say, this does not look like what I studied. I do not remember these kinds of questions. And that's because your fundamental grasp of the material isn't as strong as you thought it was. So if you think you understand something, the best way to actually gauge if you know it well enough to do well on the exam is to explain it to somebody else, whether it's someone who has no idea, likely to speak to someone who's like in the class or has done that coursework. I think the best thing is really to speak to the professor, the TA, because they're the ones who write the exams. And whose insight do you want most when it comes to doing well in exams? Your colleagues, your friends, your peers, or the people who wrote the exam? My attitude was, well, if Professor so-and-so wrote the exam, I'm going to get as close as possible to Professor so-and-so so that I can make sure that the way I'm thinking about the problem is how they are thinking, how they're going to test me. So for example, I would go to office hours with the TA and I'd say, this is what I got from the text, the chapter I read and the problems that I did. Is there another way I should be thinking about it? How can this problem be modified? Like, how else should I be prepared to see this problem? Is there another situation that I'm not thinking of or that I'm not aware of? And this is how you're able to really tease out what their thought process is when they're making these exams. They've already made the exam usually, but they know what it is that they want you to display in your knowledge. So if you just ask them, they'll tell you, especially if you are demonstrating that you are putting in energy and that you're serious about doing well. There's nothing wrong with just telling people up front, for example, hello, whoever, I'm very excited for this class. I want to become a great physician, and I'm very dedicated to doing well in your course by, whatever was set out in the syllabus. And I want to make sure that I'm understanding things the right way so that I can perform well, so that I can get an A in your course. Just tell them that, because now they know what your intention is. They know you're serious. And if you're putting the time to actually meet with them and discuss the material with them, whether it's in person or virtually or over email, they're going to be more likely to help you. People want to help people who are helping themselves generally. So keep that in mind. So those are some of the tools that I use to do well academically. And obviously for more specific and, if you wanted to interact a little bit more with this kinds of strategies, I would suggest the workbook. It's the PreMed Survival Guide. So hopefully that was helpful. It looks like there's a couple of other questions. Is that right, Rachel and Giselle? Okay.
So the next question is, how are your grades in college? I worry that I won't have the proper grades to become a physician.
So everyone who is in the chat, there are two types of medical schools in the US: allopathic or MD granting and osteopathic, DO granting. Both of these medical schools will graduate doctors, okay? Doctors who will wear the stethoscope, wear the white coat, prescribe drugs, help people with their health. So each type of medical school has a slightly different set of profiles, academic profiles for their admitted students. So everyone should go to, if you haven't already, go to the AAMC.org, or you go to AACOMAS for osteopathic medical schools, AACOM, and they will have the statistics of what their admitted and their matriculated students are like. So you already know what the ranges are, and the AmStar in particular gives excellent information for every medical school in the US of, what is the cumulative GPA, what is the science GPA, what is the average age, not that that necessarily matters, but it gives you a profile. So the thing to keep in mind with your grades is, number one, no, you do not need to be perfect. You do not need a 4.0 or 3.9 or 3.8. It helps. It definitely makes you a more competitive applicant. However, it is not the end all be all of being accepted into medical school. So what you need to do, what I would recommend you do, is check out the AmStar. You can get it for free if you qualify for the FAP, the Fee Application Program, FAP, also through the AAMC. ACOM has something similar. I don't recall the acronym. Thank you, Jubin. The link is in the chat. And you'll be able to see, okay, for each medical school, what is the range of their admitted class? The main point is you want to fall somewhere within the range. You don't need to have the 4.0 or 3.9, but if the range or the average is like 3.6, let's say science GPA, 3.7 science GPA, if you're somewhere close to that, then you're probably on the right road. So no one can tell you the exact numbers that will get you accepted, because all medical schools are really heading toward, or many of them have already enacted, holistic review of applications. And briefly, for anyone who does know what holistic review is, could you drop a 2 in the chat, please? So if you know what holistic review is.
I would probably go over it.
Okay. Holistic review generally means that it's more than just the grades or the MCAT that a medical school is looking for when they're screening their applicants. It is the experiences that you've had, the leadership experience that you've had. Are you demonstrating that you're dedicated to the practice and study of medicine, as demonstrated by your activities, the length of time you've done those activities, any scholarly works that you've done, your ability to communicate what it is about medicine that interests you or excites you, and be able to tie in your activities, your life experiences into that. So holistic review means it's not just the numbers, it's the whole story. And you'll hear that often if you are applying to this coming cycle, it's a story. You have to write a story in your personal statement, in the activities descriptions, in your disadvantage statement, if that applies. It's about communicating to somebody, okay, a complete stranger, why it is that you are suitable to the profession of medicine and to their medical school in particular, especially towards when secondaries come out, which are usually school specific. The primary application that is sent out to multiple medical schools according to which ones you delineate, which is again different for the AAMC for MD or allopathic medical schools versus ACOM for DO osteopathic medical schools. So that's what holistic review means. So when it comes to your grades, just keep that in mind. Grades aren't everything. Plenty of people with great, who've had B, C's, and maybe even lower have been accepted into medical school. However, it's good to keep in mind that because it is competitive, so many people want so few spots, that ways to distinguish yourself are things like your activities, your grades, your statement, your letters, etc. So if you're not doing well or haven't done well, then a post-bac or a special master's program can be an opportunity to display to medical schools that you have the academic rigor to be able to handle medical school, because it is much, much, much harder than anything you've seen in university. And it's not even the complexity of the material like anatomy, pharmacology, microbiology, immunology, etc. It's about the volume of information. So something that you saw in community college, in your university, where you'd cover that over a span of 6 to 8 weeks or more, in medical school, you condense that amount of time. It's extremely a condensed amount of time. The way everyone always talks about it is, it's like trying to drink from a fire hose. That's what medical school is like. You have this massive amount of information and you're just like trying to guzzle it as fast as you can and be able to process and understand the material and apply it so that you can do well on your exams, so that you can do well in your clerkships or on your rotations. So to backtrack, because I don't want to get too ahead of myself, that is generally what A, holistic review means, and B, what to keep in mind when it comes to grades.
All right, and then there's a couple questions about choosing a major, and some people in the Q&A are asking if choosing a science-based major is more helpful for medical school or studying for the MCAT.
Oh, great question. Okay, so this is what you need to keep in mind for everybody. It's not about your major that is important or that counts. It's about part one, how well you do in the prerequisite classes. And then again, like I said, the rest of your application. There have been plenty of people that I knew who did very well in school, right? They were biochem, SPI-Sci, whatever the science major was, and they did well in the MCAT, and that's it. There wasn't anything else that they were offering or demonstrating to medical schools. When everybody wants to become a doctor, current statistic, about 60,000, a little bit over 60,000 people applied to medical school, but only a little bit over 20,000 get in. So when you have that many people who want the same thing, each person who gets in, who wants to get in, has to work that much harder to really distinguish themselves from everybody else. So someone has, biochem 3.8, now let's say 510, 515 MCAT, which is stellar, right? But there's nothing else to their application. And by the way, guess what? There's a ton of other people with similar stats. So why should we take you over this other person, or 100 other people with the same exact stats? So it's not about whether or not you're a science major. You can be English major if you want, econ major. Study something you actually have an interest in and will do well in. So something that can give you good grades helps. What matters is being able to take the prerequisites. Most people end up choosing a science major because they actually have a real interest in that major, which is why so many of us did that. And also because it's an easier way to knock out all the prerequisites versus if you were non-science major, let's say social science, it may be a little bit more challenging to schedule in all your prerequisites on top of your major requirements. So that's what most people need to keep in mind when deciding their major.
Can you, there was actually a question, since we're on majors, can you explain to them, like somebody asked, what's the difference between a pre-med major and a biology major? And if you want to expand that.
Yeah, so most institutions that I'm familiar with don't necessarily have a pre-med major, like that is the name of the major, pre-med. It's essentially like a track or concept. Biology is the most common major that pre-meds choose because when you enter college, you don't know about all the majors available, and everyone ends up choosing what they think you have to do to become a doctor. I did that at first. I came in bio instead of being undeclared, and then I changed it, or I tried to change it to phi-sci, and then eventually went into to psychobiology, which is behavioral neuroscience. So the name of the majors that pre-meds choose vary. The science ones like, MCDB, MIMG, phi-sci, biochem, whatever, are the ones that are most common. If your college or institution has a major called pre-med, then that's just what it's called. And it usually means that the prerequisites for medical school are the requirements for the major.
There was a question asking about how you balanced your social life and your academic life in undergrad.
That's a great question. So things now are very different because of COVID. Depending on your institution, you may be fully virtual, or your institution may be trying a hybrid model or trying to go back to in-person 100% of the time. So it really just depends on what the current education model is at your school, because that really defines what your social experiences are going to be like. So for me, this was much earlier, prior to COVID. Most of my friends were non-science majors, so that made things very tricky because they had, for science majors, we would usually have like, we had our midterms before our finals, so you're studying for an exam more often than your non-science majors, or at least I was. So it was challenging because they'd want to go out and do things, and I'd say I have to study because I've got an exam coming up. And that's just something you have to keep in mind as a pre-med, that there is a lot of sacrifice involved, and it doesn't stop in undergrad. It just keeps going through medical school and residency and as an attending, because being a physician requires you to really operate at a very, very high level as a human being. So I always go back to, again, like your why. Like, why do you want to become a doctor? And do you really want it bad enough so that, there are times that when you could be going out, or you want to see a concert, or you want to sleep in, or whatever the case may be, you're going to have to decide to be disciplined and say, no, this thing that I want in the future, I want this much more than I want to do this other thing in the present. Doesn't mean that you always have to say no to yourself, but it does mean that you have to practice discipline with yourself and with your social circle. So that's actually in the first chapter of the Pre-Med Survival Guide. I outline how do you figure out your why so that you can provide yourself with the motivation and the discipline to do what you need to do as a pre-med, which is to do well academically. And I would like to remind everybody that even though it's really tough road that all of you are on, it is possible for you to do well. And it is possible for you to have fun. You just have to be disciplined about when you have fun. You might not be able to go out as often as your friends or be as social as you would like at times. You can pick and choose when you do that. And when you do well and you're being consistent with studying, you're able to have more fun without guilt.
Another question is, how did you explain any bad grades on your secondary applications when applying to medical school?
So secondaries are generally geared to each institution. So secondary prompt might say, why do you want to come here? Do you have any ties to this state, this institution? Because they're trying to gauge to see like, what is the likelihood that you really do actually want to come to that school versus just like blindly applying everywhere. So usually they don't ask about like grades in particular. They may ask something like, what is the challenge that you overcame, or what's the situation that turned out opposite of what you hoped for, essentially. By the way, these are all actual real prompts, so I hope you all are taking notes. So you do have opportunities, whether it's in your statement or in within secondary essays, to address grades if you feel that it's so significant enough that you should do so. But generally, I would say that that should not be the focus of either your personal statement or your secondaries, unless it's like something extreme or significant, where if a stranger looked at your transcript and they saw like C, Ds, and Fs for 2 years, and then the other 2 years or 3 years, it was, Bs, a couple of As, and they'd want to know like what happened. Was there something impacting your life, like an illness that you were suffering from, a terrible life circumstance in your family or otherwise? Because again, holistic review, it does matter, especially if you have an upward trend and you could say, well, I struggled for this reason, and then I figured out the solution and I applied myself and I got these results, which again shows problem solving, critical thinking skills. So keep that in mind, is you want to always answer the prompts and not take every prompt as an opportunity to explain what you think is a weakness or is a weakness in your application, because you have limited number of characters to do so. So you want to keep demonstrating, keep communicating that you're great, you're going to be a great medical student for these reasons. I didn't do well, but then I did so much better, and my leadership, my research, my community, whatever shows, da, da, da. You want to move on from the negative and focus on the positive.
We had someone ask if you would be willing to share a little bit of your medical school journey.
Yeah, there's so much of it. So I have an MD, so I went to allopathic medical school, came into medical school, and it was overwhelming, that drinking from a fire hose statement that we were told is very, very true. And I thought, geez Louise, like I thought I was working hard before, and I thought the MCAT was terribly hard, but this is way harder. That was like a breeze comparatively. So you will experience that every new level of medical education training is that much harder, and it's normal. It's nothing about you. There's no deficiency about you. It's just the way the process is. So at first it was a bit of a transition to get used to like the volume of the material. Obviously so much of the material was brand new to me. And at times I felt like I was behind compared to some of my peers. And I researched and I found out that many medical school students come from 1 or 2 physician households. And I say that to mean that like it does actually impact your familiarity with concepts and material. But if you are a first generation college student, underrepresented minority, it does not mean that you can't do it or that you're always going to be behind. It just means that your learning curve is going to look a little different. So that's something I would like everyone to keep in mind, write it down, and keep it in a place that you can refer to. So when you get to medical school, you'll understand that your experience is actually very, very common. So the way my medical school was structured. It's essentially the first 2 years are, you can think of it as classwork, the books, lectures. A lot of them were videotaped, so you didn't have to come to lecture if you didn't want to. And then the last 2 years are generally very core focused in the hospital, clerkships and rotations. But we in many medical schools have experiences from day one, really, first year of medical school, where you are seeing real patients and you have an opportunity to apply what it is that you're actually learning. So you read about these drugs, beta blockers, and then you go to the hospital on your rotation with your preceptor, and the patient is on the beta blockers and, is post-operative. So you will get a lot of interaction very early with patients, which is really great, especially if you're more of a hands-on learner and that keeps you excited and motivated. You'll really enjoy that aspect of medical school. And everyone else is in pretty much the same boat from that respect. So you're going to be able to make friends, socialize. You're going to work really, really hard. And you and your colleagues are going to, once a block is complete, you're going to have time to socialize, have fun, relax before you start the next block. So that essentially happens in cycles. Every month or so, you're moving on to a new block, new material. So that's why I said the volume is quite high. So how you do in undergrad and on your MCAT, part of the reason why medical schools do pay attention to that is not because it's going to define whether or not you're a great doctor. It doesn't. It's because especially MCAT performance, is correlated with your ability to perform on another exam between your first and second year, which is your USMLE Step 1, which is now pass scale instead of graded or scored. So that's a little bit about my medical school journey. And if you want a little bit more details about challenges and how did I deal with the self-doubt that happens to everyone, and maybe especially if you're a first-gen woman underrepresented in medicine, please read the PreMed Survival Guide. I wrote it for everyone who, is like me in that sense of having those experiences of you're in medical school and your family is like, what are you doing? I don't get it. Didn't you just do that before? Or how long are you going to be doing this for? I thought you were done. How long is this going to take? All those kinds of things that end up happening when you are the first in your family to forge a new path. I put that in the PreMed Survival Guide because I don't believe in gatekeeping. I think it's important for everyone to have the resources they need to do well, because at the end of the day, that helps all of us. People can get access to more diverse physicians who are compassionate and great at what they do. It helps the patients, it helps the physicians, it helps the society. So I would say that.
And this is actually one of the questions as a first generation. This is a question. As a first generation, it is sometimes hard to get my family to understand how important my education is, whether they think I'm spending too much time studying or not taking on traditional roles they expect. Any tips on how to deal with that?
Yeah. So first, self-kindness, be kind with yourself. And number two, a little compassion and kindness for your parents and family also, because they just don't know. They're not living your experiences. They don't understand. Especially if they're first gens, they don't understand what the education system is like, and it can be very different from their home country. And it's a lot of just patience and understanding that if people don't have shared experiences, it's difficult for them to appreciate the challenges that you're undergoing and trying to overcome. So you might find that you're struggling either in a class, or there may be a social situation, a professor, researcher, wherever, and you're having a challenge of like, well, I want to get to this end goal of being a doctor, but this immediate thing is in my way and giving me a hard time. You might find that it's hard to get actionable advice from your family because they don't know. They haven't been in that situation. They can provide you with the lessons learned from their life experiences, which usually are relevant. But for specific actionable advice as a pre-med, you got to talk to someone who's actually been there, done that, because they're the ones who know. They know how you feel. They know the stress. They know the anxiety. They know the competition. They know the doubt. They know all that. And they're able to give you actionable advice, like how I just shared with you all earlier, of going to the source of the exams and making sure that you understand everything in so many different, from so many different perspectives, from the person who creates the exam versus, shared misery with your peers, talking about how hard something is. Like, take that energy and use it in a productive manner. So someone who's been there can tell you that, and someone who hasn't may just say, study harder, or don't go out with your friends, or whatever, or you just need to focus more. So I would say, to summarize, try to be kinder to yourself and understand that when you're forging a new path, it's just so challenging, but you can do it. Other people have done it, and it's about networking. So connecting with people like myself and others over social media or otherwise, who can provide you that encouragement or actionable advice. Using resources, both free, like everything that's online. The AAMC even has blogs for pre-meds, which are great. I know SDN is a very common thing. I used it a lot. And this is my advice, because I had done this, try so hard not to be on it 24/7 like I was. But you can use, like, whether it's Reddit, SDN, otherwise, there's so many, again, free resources to speak to people who are current medical students or rising medical students, using resources that you invest in yourself, like the Pre-Med Survival Guide, where somebody has already put everything down in an organized format for you in your particular life circumstances, so that you can navigate those challenges easier. So that is another, that's another thing that you can keep in mind. And then also just being a little understanding that usually our families want us to do well, and usually they want to encourage us, but they just might not know the details. And that's just part of the immigrant experience, whether you come from, you and your family come from Mexico or Iran or Eritrea or Nigeria or Indonesia or wherever. That's part of the inherent challenge of being an immigrant, of being new to a system and a society that operates differently or operates in a complex manner. So it's par for the course, but you can do it. Connect, network with people who are similar to you. Oh, here's a really good piece of advice. A lot of schools now have, like a lot of universities have, resources and programs and centers specifically for first generation students, specifically for them, because enough research and experience from people has shown, like, this is a completely new pathway and you need unique support when you are the first to go. So if there's a certain school that you're interested in transferring into, for example, check them out to find out, do they have a first generation center? Many do. And if they don't, again, on social media, like IG, you can find there's a lot of first generation centers and resources at UCs and otherwise. So you can connect with them, even if you're not a student there, to see if there's resources that you can access, like webinars and things like that.
This is probably my favorite question. My activities are often not always health oriented, but social justice related. Example, intern at University Women's Center, tutoring student. Is this looked down upon by admission?
So is social justice oriented activities looked down upon? Is that correct?
Yes.
Did I hear you correctly?
And not health related.
And not what related?
Health related. Like,
yeah. So,
oriented, sorry, health oriented.
Yeah, I understand. That's a great question. So first of all, outside of you being a pre-med and an aspiring doctor, you are a human being. So you have emotions, you have passions, you have challenges, you have fears. So when you are interested in doing something, do it. It's okay. it doesn't always have to be exactly cookie cutter. I was drawing blood for patients in the emergency room. I was a scribe for this GI doctor, whatever. If that's something that is a passion for you, then that's fine, do it. If you are consistent or have a leadership position in it, even better, because that could be an activity that you use, as long as you're able to relate it back to medicine. So if, let's say, I think it was like, let's say for women education or whatever, and you say, well, my interest in medicine is about medicine is an extension of social justice, because just like access to education, access to healthcare is a justice-oriented issue. So I engage in activities that enable me to blah, blah, blah. And I can use the skills and experiences from this activity in medicine and medical school in this way, blah, blah, blah. So do you see how I'm relating these activities? It's about being able to tell a story. A lot of, again, I'm going to refer to social media because it is just like so great for pre-meds. There are so many pre-meds and incoming MS1, so first year medical students, that post their personal statements and some of their activities on their social to share with other pre-meds. They can see, like, this is an example, not the only way, but an example of an accepted student's description of their activities or their personal statement. So I would say that that's also an additional resource that you can look into. If you just type in pre-med account and then scroll and you find a current pre-med and or an incoming medical student, a lot of them are posting parts of their personal statements and stuff, so you can refer to that. But generally, you don't have to be only doing things that are just medicine or health. But if you are spending a significant amount of time where you have leadership in those activities, then talk about how that's related, or talk about how that's like a skill set or a passion that is, influences your passion for medicine or contributes to it in some way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I could just tell you, I work in the ER, and most of the physicians, most of the things you're dealing with are social issues like placement, where are you going to send this person? So these are a lot of things that you just gotta have to do as a human being, and making sure that that responsibility is there. So if you're working at a women's resource center, you're dealing with people that have gone through some issues and things, and you could find, connect them with resources. But I like what she said, Dr. Hagos said that, following your passion, if that's what you're passionate about, like, and I think we've had enough deans of admission say this over and over again, that they're looking for diverse people, not every single person that has been a scribe, so.
Yeah, thank you, Juben, for sharing your experience. And that's right. I will also share that I did interview medical school applicants as well. So what I'm saying is not from thin air, it's actually from experience that's relevant.
One other question is, what things did you do to show medical school your dedication and rigor in becoming a great doctor you are today? For example, did you volunteer at hospitals?
Yeah, good question. So I did several activities, but generally they were in like 3 camps. So I did extensive amount of shadowing. I shadowed an electrophysiologist, so a cardiologist specialist. I also did clinical volunteering or health-related volunteering. And it was, there was a lot that I did in that area because that was a passion of mine: health education, addressing health inequities, providing access to medical care. And then the third area was, I also did research. And I didn't publish or get to present, but that's okay. I actually did get asked about it on interviews. By the way, for special gem for everyone applying this cycle or the next, whatever you do, an activity, research, whatever, if you put on your application, be prepared to be asked about it, because you will. Even if it's 2, 3, 4 years old, they'll ask about it. So make sure you review what it is that you did, what your research project was about, etc.
And someone asked, what was the most challenging part of your medical school journey?
That's a great question. When I didn't perform as well as I wanted to, and dealing with that. Most of us who go into medicine, many of us, are type A to a degree. We have very high expectations of ourselves. We work hard and we expect the results to come back the way we want it. And sometimes it just doesn't happen for various reasons. So that was something that was challenging for me, was studying so hard for exams and just, getting the equivalent of a B or getting the equivalent of a C. I'm laughing now because we'd always say this, and in many medical schools, they're becoming pass fail. It's not necessarily graded like undergrad is. P is MD, P equals MD. If you pass, you're still going to be a doctor. Try not to beat yourself up about it. So I would share that.
Going back to your mention about research, how early or soon do you suggest we get started with research experience? I am the first in my family to go into medicine, and I hear research is important. So how can we go about getting started on those opportunities?
Yeah. So two questions I heard there is how and when. In terms of when, it's up to you. If you want to start, and it depends on your schedule too, because you got to remember, you want to do well academically, do as best as you can. So try not to overload yourself. So if you're able to, you have the bandwidth to do so, then find a project that you have some kind of interest in. And if it isn't, perfectly medical, like let's say it's, psychology, let's say it's psychology research in adolescents or children, it still counts as research. So broaden your mindset about what is acceptable as research for medical schools. At the end of the day, the main point is being able to learn, understand, and apply the scientific method, and creating a project, maintaining a project, hopefully getting to the point of, submitting an abstract for a presentation or submitting an article for publication. Though if you don't get that, it's okay. So you can get started when you feel like you can get started. And keep in mind, it's all about strategy. Being a pre-med is all about strategy. You've got limited amount of time and definite things that you can do to increase the odds of you getting accepted and getting scholarships as well. So be strategic. That is the second and third chapter of the pre-med survival guide. I talk about how to be strategic with your time, whether it's dealing with people who are negative or when you're trying to do well in school and otherwise. So I really urge everyone to check out the pre-med survival guide. So get involved in research when you can. Try to find a project or an area that you're actually interested in, because then it's easier to stay in the project and then do well in the project, meaning hopefully present or get published. You're more likely to invest in things that you actually have an interest in, like being a pre-med. So same thing applies to research. And as to how, the common way that we all know, which is asking. You talk to people, your friends who are older than you, or in your age range, your grade or whatever, your year, and ask them, like, are they involved in anything? Is there certain PIs that are very productive, meaning they have multiple projects available? And then you just go ahead and you become a salesperson. Essentially, you talk to them and you find out if there's a good match and you try to get in that way.
Someone asked if the last 2 years of medical school were easier than the first 2 years.
That's good. So it depends. In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. Easier in terms of, by that point, you are pretty much on a roll with how you study, and you kind of have an idea of how things work, both the medical school and the material and how it's, what they're looking for. Like you understand the difference between first, second, and third order questions. And then in other ways, it's harder because you are now closer to becoming a clinician and you're dealing with patients, complex cases. You're also dealing with working physically, being at the hospital, taking call, having shifts versus just, more exclusively studying all the time. Now you're tasked with studying and performing in the hospital as a medical student, seeing patients, rounding, coming up with management treatments, reading relevant research articles that could inform your treatment plan, being able to defend your thought process in front of your peers, in front of attendings and nurses. So it has its own set of challenges. Every time you transition to something different, whether it's a new rotation or, like the last 2 years versus the first 2 years, some things you get more comfortable with, and other things it's another challenge to address.
One question is, well, first of all, thank you for the great information. What was your why of becoming a doctor? Like, what kept motivating you to pursue your goals when you were feeling challenged or overwhelmed, that in medical school and in your undergrad?
Yeah. For the details, I'll refer to the PreMed Survival Guide because I put everything in there. In general, it was a result of my experiences and observations as a first generation, as an immigrant, and seeing that there were a lot of disparities in healthcare. There was a lot of disparities in health outcomes, and it's a multifactorial problem. And I was excited and interested to actually do something about it. That's the short answer. And I'm going to ask how many more questions do we have?
So it looks like we have about 20 more questions, but we can go whenever you need to.
Okay, let's keep going.
All right, someone asked, does it matter what medical school you go to? Is there a medical school that's better than others?
Okay, I'm just responding just real quick. Okay. Does it matter? It depends. The answer to everything is going to be it depends. So medical schools are different. They have different mission statements. They serve different patient populations. They have different structures to their curriculum. Some may be more research focused than others, though many more now are trending toward even requiring a research project or a capstone project for all medical students, regardless of whether or not you want to be a researcher clinician. So it depends. It depends on what you want, what you're trying to get. If you're just trying to get in anywhere, you don't care, then okay, then they're similar in that way. I get that. All of us are saying it, and the truth is you only need one medical school to get accepted and become a doctor. So I'll say the first part is it depends. And second, every medical school is going to graduate. Medical is going to graduate doctors that have met a certain core set of competencies and skill sets. So in that sense, with some differences, everyone is becoming a doctor. You may have more exposure or more challenges or what have you at different institutions. Let's say if it's like a large medical school versus a small one that's located in a rural center versus one in the city, one that's in the Caribbean versus one that's in Texas, et cetera. So they all can be so different in that way, but the way that they are similar is they all have to meet a common set of core objectives like professionalism and clinical competencies. So in that way, they're similar. So in terms of, does it matter where you go? Not necessarily, unless there's something in particular you're trying to achieve, like, you want to go to a medical school that's in a state because all your family's there, then that's going to be probably a better medical school than anywhere else. Or you really want to get into research, but you don't want to do PhD, then the medical schools that are very research focused are going to be the ones that are better for you. So it really depends.
Being a woman in the medical field, did you ever feel isolated, or how did you battle with that imposter syndrome if it was present?
How did I battle imposter syndrome? So I realized that imposter syndrome is likely due to several factors, internal and external. So you either have doubt, self-doubt, pre-existing that has always been there for whatever reason, or as a result of new challenges and new experiences that you've never experienced, you start doubting whether or not you can handle the new level of rigor. And also it can be impacted by how other people treat you or how you perceive other people treat you or think about you. So it's definitely, I don't think it's just something that happens because you feel like you're an imposter. Somebody can feel like they're an imposter and that they don't belong. Or someone can feel, oh, okay, this is hard, but I'm trying. And then your perceptions of other people and how other people actually behave towards you makes you question or doubt yourself. So I will say that a lot of people struggle with that. A lot of people, and not just pre-meds, medical students, residents, even junior attendings. We all have this idea of what it means to be a doctor. And if we feel like we're falling short of our own idea or an idea that someone else gave us that we approve to accept, then yeah, it gets very difficult at times because it's really hard. I laugh because it's very hard to explain to you all why it's so hard, but I'll give you a few examples because I hate it when people just give me general statements. So it's hard because you will be on your feet for 24 hours at a time. It's hard because you will not have used the bathroom in over 12 hours. It'll be hard because you are hungry or you are in pain, physical pain, emotional, spiritual, mental pain for whatever reason, and you still need to perform. You still need to take care of patients. You still need to work with your colleagues. You still need to collaborate. You still need to lead. So it's hard for those reasons and more. It's hard because you'll see very, very sad things. You'll see innocent people who have been harmed by other people through no fault of their own, and now they're landed in the hospital fighting for their lives. You'll see a lot of things as a physician, as a medical student, as a resident, as a pre-med, even if you're a scribe or whatever, for example. And because it's so hard for so many reasons, it's really important to develop a strong sense of self, separate from your accomplishments and separate from what it is that you do. I talk about that a lot in the pre-med survival guide because so many pre-meds, you end up defining yourself, how good of a person you are, how worthy you are, based off of what grade you got, what score you got, how many hours you got, what if you published or not, or whatever, what your letters are like. And it's a really bad way to continue in that vein, to define your worth based off of external metrics of accomplishment, because undoubtedly there will be many times when you don't perform well. And if that means that you're going to end up many times feeling like you're not smart enough, not worthy enough, not good enough, not whatever, it's going to get really, really tough for you to keep going. And this pathway is very long. It does not stop. And unless you choose to step back from it, which is okay if you need to do that. So I would say to check out the pre-med survival guide to figure out how to deal with that imposter syndrome and self-doubt, because it's a lot to get into that can't just be covered in one session right now.
Someone asked how you chose your specialty.
I came into medical school thinking I was going to be a nephrologist, so kidney doctor. Talked to a couple of nephrologists and then ended up changing my mind. And I was involved in researching anesthesia because I was like, oh, well, I have this interest. If it works out, great. If it doesn't, well, doing research and presenting like I did at regional and national conferences as a medical student is still going to help me out for any specialty I choose. And I liked that it was a mixture of hands-on and cerebral work. So in anesthesia, it's very hands-on. So induction, intubation, peripheral line placement like IVs, invasive line placements like arterial lines, central lines, performing nerve blocks, peripheral nerve blocks, neuroaxial anesthesia, so epidural, spinals. There's a lot of work that you do with your hands, and I enjoy that it was active in that way. But it's also very cerebral. Like if you look at an anesthesiologist in the operating room when they're not, after they've completed that procedural work, you may think, oh, they're just sitting down, not doing anything. And it's like, so not true. An anesthesiologist is constantly monitoring, scanning, thinking, problem solving, expecting, planning for worst case scenarios, trying to stave off situations. I'll give you an example. So let's say you're an anesthesiologist in the OR and you have an emergency case coming in. It's a gunshot victim, and that's all you know. And I've had that happen. I didn't know the gender. I didn't know the age. I don't know anything. I don't know if they had lines, if they were already intubated, and I had to be prepared for uncertainty. Okay, it could be a guy or girl. Okay, I'm going to have different tubes, endotracheal tubes, different size according to the gender of the patient. I'm going to have invasive line, like my A-line kit ready in case the patient isn't lined up, but they're going to be lined up because it's an emergency. You need beat-to-beat hemodynamic monitoring. Once they're in the room and you assess them quickly, if they're still talking, if they're not, then you move appropriately. Even if the patient is, let's say, lined up, they already have their invasive lines, they're already intubated, sedated, like your job is not complete. Now you need to try to maintain hemodynamic stability. Either they're hemorrhaging, they're undergoing a severe or fatal arrhythmia, heart rhythm irregularity, and you need to address it. So even in a non-emergent situation, an anesthesiologist is always very self-aware and has situational awareness of what's going on in the room. What is your IV, is your IV bag almost out? Okay, are your lines clean? Where are your syringes? Is everything labeled? What's the urine output like? What is the EBL, this estimated blood loss? What's going on in the case? How close are they to finishing or not? Do you need to refill various, medications? What is your volatile anesthetic level like? What are their vitals like? Is it the same? Is it trending in a positive or negative direction? So I liked that it was cerebral and hands-on. Short summary.
Do you recommend students complete a master's degree or an MPH to make them stand out?
I say it depends. It really depends. An extra degree does not mean that you're automatically a more competitive applicant, because it has to make sense. You have to be strategic. If you're taking a degree just to take it, why? What's the reason? If I was interviewing, I'd want to know, like, why'd you get the MPH? What do you want to do with that? How is that going to help you as a physician? How's that going to inform your future work? I'm going to want to know what your grades are like. Are they excellent? Were you doing very well and you're going to continue to do well in medical school or not? So it really depends on why you're doing it and how you think it's going to help you. I'm starting to see that there are a lot of students who are doing that, like taking, doing a special master's. The majority of them are doing it because they want to boost their GPA, their science GPA, their cumulative GPA to be more competitive. And that's great. That's definitely a way to do that, whether it's through post-bac, self-directed post-bac, or a master's program. Just make sure you have like a rationale for why you're doing it.
Someone said that they're a fairly shy person and they struggle with networking. Is there anything that you can recommend on navigating that?
Yeah, think of it differently. Maybe the word networking and what you think that means is like, can be overwhelming. So think of it as forming new friendships, forming relationships, professional relationships with people in fields and areas that you have an interest in. And that might help you if you are introverted or a shy person, because then it kind of helps to relieve some of the pressure you might feel socially. Another thing is to keep in mind that there are a lot of ways that you can do that now. There's so many virtual opportunities, so that could help you if you feel shy or nervous speaking to strangers. Maybe that interface virtually can help you to speak to and reach out to physicians and researchers and healthcare leaders to say, hey, I'm so-and-so. I saw your presentation. I liked it. I had a question. Or can I help you with this particular project? And that can be a method to address that.
Yeah, I would say if you're a shy person, I was a very shy person growing up, and somebody taught me this really neat trick. Every time you go out, meet one new person and talk with them more than a couple of minutes. So it first started a minute, then I would have 20-minute conversations with people that I would run into in different places. So, but I think like if you're a shy person, I think this is something that you should work on now, because in medicine, you barely get to know somebody and you tell them very hard things within a few minutes, or you end up touching them in very weird places right away. So it's a good place where, with a lot of your peers, they could be your guinea pig.
Yes, that's very true. For anesthesia and so many other physicians, you establish rapport and trust very quickly. So a complete stranger, you say, hello, so-and-so, I'm Dr. So-and-so. Based off your symptoms and what you're telling me to help you, I would need to perform this physical exam. And you can talk them through it, and that can kind of help you too. If you feel a little bit nervous, which most people do the first times that you're learning to develop your clinical skill set, but then you get used to it because you've had so much practice. So same thing applies to networking. The more you do it, the better it is, and start small, like Jubin said. I can't hear you, Giselle.
My bad. I didn't properly click on the button. But how would hospitals or residency programs look at the Caribbean medical schools or other foreign medical schools?
How do hospitals look at Caribbean and foreign medical schools? That's two separate questions. Foreign medical graduates usually come to the US and need to go through all the USMLE licensing, so step 1 through 3. And there is very high competition there. So the expectation is for very high performance in general. I'm not an expert on foreign medical graduates and their specific challenges, but I do know some great physicians online that essentially cater to them because they came from that demographic. So if that is a particular question for you, feel free to inbox me on at motivationmd_101, and I'll connect you to that particular physician. I'm thinking of one right now. And there's also a couple that cater to also non-trad or non-traditionals, pre-meds. And in terms of Caribbean medical schools, again, that's also a whole another arena. And I'm not going to claim that I have expertise in that because, again, that's a unique set of challenges. Partially, yeah, I'm just going to say that unique set of challenges. If you have questions about that, again, inbox me and I'll connect you to someone who would have better answers for you.
Someone asked if there was anything you would have done differently in your medical school journey.
Planned more fun. Yeah, simple answer.
And then someone else asked, how did you prepare for medical school interviews? Or what were some questions asked, or how did you make sure your answers were what they wanted?
I actually made a couple of posts about prepping for virtual interviews on my IG at motivationmd_101. In general, prepare. It's just like exams, right? You do a lot of practice questions for your exam in the style that your exam will be. Same thing for interviews. You practice for the virtual interview virtually and review yourself. And if there's someone that you trust, like a mentor, then you can have them give you feedback. That way, when you get to the interview, although you still feel a little bit nervous, it won't display outwardly. You'll be confident and poised and calm.
Someone asked, what is the most rewarding part of your job?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate to have direct access to very intimate and treasured moments in the human experience. One of those was here's an example, when I was on OB, obstetrics, there was a couple. So there was a woman who was having a C-section, and, baby came out, everything was fine, baby was crying, parents were crying, everyone was very happy. And I learned from the parents that they had been trying for years to have a baby, that they underwent several failed fertility treatments, and they were just so ecstatic that they finally now could have a baby. And for me, that was a really precious moment, because you get to witness, really the full spectrum of the human experience, both the best and the worst, or the hardest. So that is a particular memory that I enjoy. I will say, for now, I have taken a step back from clinical medicine to focus on entrepreneurship and consulting with digital and health tech companies. And that was that's one of the experiences that I really enjoyed. Getting to witness that was very precious.
Someone asks, someone states, I'm a bio major who generally loves the subject, but I'm worried that I am choosing a major that is common in applications. Should I try to choose a major that is less common? And this person is a second year in their undergrad.
Great question. How do you stand out? It's basically what it's saying. So if you like the major, then stay in it, because at the end of the day, you're going to be able to speak about it much better than someone else who hates it and they're just doing it to check off a box. Trying to stand out by your major is unnecessary. Just keep this in mind. 60,000 people are applying to medical school. A lot of them are bio majors. It's okay if you're a bio major or, any other science major. That's not, a huge part of the application process. So do what you like and do well. That's what counts.
Someone asked, in what year of undergrad are you supposed to apply to medical school?
It depends. If you want to go straight from undergrad to medical school, so if let's say you're graduating right now in 2022 and you wanted to start medical school immediately, then that means you would have had to start applying a year ago. So it's a year-long process. So if you apply during your junior year, then you go through the whole process, primaries, secondaries, interviews during your senior year, so that you could get admitted and matriculate in the summer after your senior graduation. If you, however, want to take a gap year for any reason, which, by the way, is totally okay, and not negatively looked upon, a lot more students are doing that, then you can do that. Then that means you finish school, and if you can and do well on your MCAT during college, then you can do that. It's good for your school. Your score is good for a couple years, I think 3. And then you could do your application cycle in your gap year. So it really just depends on you and if you're prepared to do it, because it is a year-long cycle.
Someone says, after all this time, can you say you're still happy and satisfied with your decision to become an MD? I can't wait to start, but the time the process is taking makes me feel so impatient. I wish I could start now.
Yeah, that's an awesome question. In other countries, their process is a little bit different. It's like a 6-year program instead of 4 years of undergrad and then 4 years of medical school. So I definitely understand the feeling of impatience, especially if you know this is what you want to do. And I would just provide a friendly reminder that it's okay to also enjoy your life and take advantage of the extra time that you have when you're not in medical school and when you're not a doctor to do other things that you enjoy, because it does get harder to do those things when you're in medicine, just from a time and energy standpoint. Energy, because even though you may, let's say, have a day or a weekend off, if you're just so tired from your rotations or from studying that you just want to hibernate and eat and sleep, then you do that. And in terms of satisfaction from, the long road and the delayed gratification that is medicine, it really just depends on you. And something I realize is that we are constantly evolving people. Our interests may change in certain ways. I just did a podcast last night, and the host is a family practice physician. And we were chatting before the interview, and she mentioned, I'm at a point where I want to do something else. Like, I want to work with startups and help them with their health, health education materials and product optimization delivery. And I said, I totally get it. Some of us get to that point, as junior doctors pretty quickly, others after 5, 10, 20 years in practice. So I would just like to say that thinking and hoping that medicine will be totally satisfying and totally worth it, it really just depends on you as a person, because you're still a person. So if you're, if you have kids, you want kids, man or woman or whatever, then that may be like a shifting priority for you. And you don't want to spend as much time working because you want to spend more time with your family. Or, you don't like working in the hospital as much anymore because whatever the reason is, and you want to move into industry or set up your own practice or pivot from, family medicine to lifestyle medicine. So it really just depends on you. And I cannot give you an answer of, will that fulfill kind of like your ultimate? For me, I realize that my interests in medicine and business are never going to go away. Even though I step back from clinical medicine, I still read articles. All my friends, most of my friends are physicians and physician researchers. So I also like to nerd out over like medical related content and stuff. That's always been an interest of mine. It's not going to go away, even though I'm focused more so on the business and entrepreneurial aspect right now. And would I ever go back? Yeah, I think there's a possibility, because I didn't do all of this just to get letters after my name. It's a very, very expensive set of letters. And then I'm not talking about just money. I'm talking about your time, like your life. You're really dedicating years of your life for these letters and what those letters represent and what those letters mean, and the authority it grants you and the access it grants you. So I'll say all that in short. And thank you, Driven. Yeah, I do have to go. I would like to eat dinner. So if there are a few last questions, I'll do my best to answer them rapid fire. I would definitely recommend everyone who's on today's webinar, go to motivationmd_101, follow me, turn on your notifications, because all I post is pre-med content and motivation to help you to complete this journey as successfully and in the most healthy way possible. a lot of us end up focusing on like just getting into medical school, just getting in to be a doctor. And we don't actually focus on like positive coping strategies and strategies and frameworks to deal with negativity or doubt or imposter syndrome and all these other things that come up in this thing called life. And I put all of that in the PreMed Survival Guide because I sincerely believe that all of us who have this desire and this passion to enter medicine are uniquely qualified. It was placed on our heart or spirits, if you believe that, or if you reach that through logical means of your experiences, or you saw bad things happen to your family members or sad things happen to them because of health reasons, and now you're galvanized to do something about it for the next person who looks like you or the next person who comes from your community or whatever. You can do it. You will do it. You have to believe it, and then you have to actually act like it. I don't mean just attitude, I mean actions. So please get the PreMed Survival Guide and you will see exactly what I'm talking about.
And I know you wanted to go eat dinner, but if there's a couple more questions, if you
All
wouldn't
right, let's do
mind
them rapid
answering.
fire.
Okay, someone asked how to deal with English being their second language in medical school.
How do you deal with it? You ask for help. So if English is your second, third, fourth, fifth language, then you ask for help. Every medical school has a education or learning specialist. So talk to them and ask them for resources to help you with English as you go through the material.
A tip for studying for the MCAT.
Practice questions, practice tests, do practice tests all the time. The tests will teach you the material.
You briefly mentioned family and like taking time to focus on that. So one of the questions was, is it common for medical students to start family while in school? I want to have kids in the future, but don't know how this will affect my education.
Some medical students do have kids in medical school. I remember in my class, a couple did like maybe at least 3 to 5 that I can think of off the top of my head. So it happens, it's possible. And in terms of like time away from school, it's also possible. You just work with the administration to figure out how to change your schedule or adjust your schedule. It might mean graduating a little bit, it can mean a lot of different things. It really just depends on what you work out, but it's possible and people do it. Same thing for residency. People also have kids during residency.
Someone asked, is 45 too old for medical school?
No. One of my good friends was very non-trad. He was in his mid-40s when he started medical school. Yeah, I mean, we actually did residency together, different specialties. We're still friends, but no, it's not too, I mean, if this is what you want, it's what you want. No one's going to really convince you otherwise. So he got in and he did well. He finished. He's a doctor now.
Yeah, tomorrow we have somebody who started medical school at 36. We had somebody else that started at 41 on some of our different webinars. So, yeah.
Is there an advantage to double majoring?
It depends on what you think the advantage is. If you can perform well, it's what you want to do, then you do it. Yeah. Rapid fire answers.
Any tips on memorizing for classes?
Study for the test, study to the test. So get practice exams and questions that are as close as possible and study how you need. In undergrad, it can take you more time to memorize, and that's okay. And by the time you get to medical school, you're gonna have to get faster, and you will. Just again, you can refer to your learning specialist. Flashcards are a great way to memorize.
Will we be questioned about the number of units we took each semester? How have you heard anything about this?
Can you repeat that?
They asked, will we be questioned about the number of units we took each semester? So I'm assuming like credit wise, and like, have you heard anyone being asked this or anything regarding this topic?
I haven't heard anyone be asked it. I mean, the only off the top of my head that I could think somebody would even ask that is if there's something like very significant or extreme about it, like you took, you know, even your school's allowed to, it could let you took 5, 6, 7 courses in a quarter, or you took whatever above the average for a semester. I would say generally no. It's, the questions aren't really geared about how many units you take. It's about how you did. And if there was something standing in your way to doing well, then it's something that they would either ask or that you would address if you felt like you would improve your odds of getting accepted.
I'm going to steal this answer from the Dean of Admission from Irvine. And he said, if you get 12 units and you have all A's, we don't ask questions. If you take 30 units and you have all F's, we ask a lot of questions. So you want to get the highest grades and the best grades possible. So if you think that somebody's going to give you a cookie for doing a lot of units and, you know, and getting bad grades, that's going to affect you more than, but I also think at the UCs, in order for you to be full-time and get financial aid at 12 units, so.
And I think those are pretty much all of the questions. The remaining questions that there are ones that you've addressed throughout your talk. So thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and thank you so much for talking with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for being so interactive. That makes things so much more interesting. And to all the moderators, Giselle, Rachel, and Jubin, thank you so much for keeping everything organized and clear. I appreciate it. I had entered in my contact info, my IG, and my website, drmanna.com, for the PreMed Survival Guide in the chat. So for anyone who will still be present after we click off, just scroll up and try to find it. Otherwise, I'm sure, I think Jubin actually also mentioned it earlier. He retyped it.
Yeah, I reposted it a couple of times, so.
Okay, awesome, thank you. So yeah, I'm open to questions. I had wonderful people that mentored me and poured into me so I could be in the position I'm in now, and I'm very happy to give back and do the same. And for everyone who is first gen, underrepresented minority in medicine, you are going to be an awesome doctor. Everyone here in this chat, you're going to be an awesome doctor. You can do it. All the people who say you can't or are naysayers, ignore them. If they're not actually a doctor, then they really don't know what it is that you're doing or that you can get there, okay? And that includes advisors. And get the PreMed Survival Guide at drmanna.com. You won't regret it. I think a few people probably have already done that. So kudos to you if you've done that. Great job investing in yourself.
All right. Thank you so much, and have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there going to be a way that I could get a copy of this recording?
Yeah, we could post it on